Hi, and welcome to the Law Simplified. I'm Shaveen Bandaranaike. A common question I get asked by not just my masterclass or fast track students, but also those of you who watch these YouTube videos, as well as the 40,000 plus students on the online law school platform, is quite a straightforward one, which is, how do I remember case law? If you like the type of content that I make on this very channel, as well as the different platforms the Law Simplified is disseminated on, do give a like to this video, share it with your friends and colleagues, and make sure to leave a comment on what other type of videos and lessons that you'd like to learn. Now, while it might seem rudimentary and quite straightforward, this in fact is one of the most daunting questions for students. Now, granted, when you take the subject of law, something that's quite voluminous is in relation to cases. For instance, if you take a subject like the law of tort, or even contract or criminal law, oftentimes, at least on a fundamental, very basic level, you'd have to have a familiarity or an understanding of upwards of 60 to 70 cases. And it could seem overwhelming, especially when you consider the volume of theory that you might have to cover. Whenever someone asks me, how do you remember so many cases and how do you know what to apply where, I have to preface my response by saying that there is no quick, shortcut route to it. There is a lot of effort, there is time that you have to spend, and it's not something that you can do in the 11th hour. But there is a tried and tested method, a 3-stage process that you can implement and integrate into your program of study in order to not just understand and remember the cases, but be capable of applying and using it appropriately in your responses. Step number 1 is repetition. Now, by repetition, what I mean is not essentially to rote learn a case and keep going over it constantly, over and over again in a memory capacity test, so to speak. Rather, what I mean is to prepare your notes and your summaries of the subject matter at different stages. Now, throughout the different courses that I've conducted, as well as on this YouTube channel, in a number of videos under the banner of How to Ace a Law Exam, I have spoken about my particular technique, how I used to listen and learn from my lecturers and my professors, take down extensive notes, and then over a period of a week or two would summarize them into smaller and smaller chunks until finally I would develop my spider graphs, which you can find when you check the description below. Now, by doing so, by repeating this process and going through the material over and over again, you're going to encounter the same cases and the same material constantly. Repetition is key in order to not just train yourself to understand and as well as recollect what the case may be, but also to have a better notion of how to use it. Which leads me to the second step. Step number 2 is to visualize. Now, one of the key attributes of the technique that I have implemented, and thousands of students around the world have used this, not just to learn the subject, but also to respond to examination questions, is to develop a spider graph, essentially a mind map that helps you to contextualize and to summarize that which you have learned. Now, this is a great asset when you think about a subject like law, because it's quite voluminous and it goes to great lengths depending on the particular subject that you're looking at. But why this is important is because now you are able to integrate or incorporate, let's say, a case to a particular area. So, for example, Donohue and Stevenson as it relates to duty of care, or Vaughan and Menlove as it relates to breach. That being said, this cannot be done without first going through step number 1, essentially, because the spider graph is a distillation of whatever the notes that you have summarized over time. So step number 2 is to create a visual representation of it. Visualize the case. Step number 3 is application. There is no better way to understand how a case is used and why it is important, the principle of it and its articulation in the proper manner without really putting pen to paper. You have to try and understand why the case is significant and why it is relevant to any given scenario, and the only way to do so is to practice, practice, and practice. Write as many answer scripts as you can, applying those cases. If you find that there are more than one case for any given scenario, any given principle, try and alternate between those. Try to find the nuances that distinguish one from the other. Right. The reason for this video is because it's an issue that has been percolating for some time in the law student community, and it's a question that I get asked constantly. How do I remember cases? When in fact the actual question should be, how do I apply these cases to given scenarios? Now, if you recall the 3 steps that I mentioned, which is to have repetition, to visualize, and to apply that constantly, and without leaving it to the 11th hour, you'll be able to articulate responses at a much higher level than you would otherwise have been able to. If you'd like to learn more about the different subjects in law, as well as how to read questions properly and articulate comprehensive responses, I'd highly recommend having a look at the online law school platform, which has comprehensive fast-track and masterclass courses based on the one-on-one sessions that I've had with thousands of students over the past several years. But until the next time that we meet, have fun, stay safe, and as always, obey the law.